So there was an interview that Bishop Dyer did, aka Baron Corbin, from when he was in WWE, and he was just kind of going over how he was kind of treated in his last run, where he was let go with the company. I have the quote here when he's referencing WWE. When you get closer to your contract ending, I'm 6 months from my contract being up, and I'm not on TV. It's not a coincidence. When they present you the contract, they go, "You haven't been on TV in 2 months." Yeah, but I was 2.5 years prior. They lowball you. We can infer, right, that, I guess a strategy that WWE could employ to kind of negotiate in their favor when it comes to renewing contracts and various, facets of employment. They seem to stall on many of these talents so that there's justification to essentially lower their stock, or say that their value has been lowered since they are not being used, right? But who determines that? Baron Corbin, for example, especially in his last run, kind of when the Vince transition was happening to Triple H, he's done a really good job of putting the talent over that he's been working with. The tag team he had with Braun Breaker was really funny and awesome, and I was someone who was kind of sour on Baron Corbin in his initial run, but that was just because he was doing such a good job, I think, as a top heel. His initial gimmick in NXT was really cool, and then eventually, like, through all the Vince main roster stuff, he did kind of prove that given anything, he will try to make that work, and that's always something to appreciate in an entertainer. So it kind of does suck to see when these people who have been so committed to a company and so committed to that entertainment and putting on the best product despite whatever their role might be, kind of get shafted at the end to just kind of cut corners. And I think we kind of saw that with Karrion Kross as well, where his contract was coming up and they kind of gave him a last minute ultimatum as kind of a proxy offer to just kind of say that they did give him an offer, right? Not a serious, sincere consideration for them to keep really moving forward, or keep working moving forward. As I've mentioned before with kind of the TKO takeover, there's been a lot more corporate kind of happenings in terms of like how they handle their employment and all that type of stuff. And in the unique realm of wrestling, where everyone is an independent contractor, it makes that even harder for the wrestlers to really have any say or any autonomy in how much they're getting paid and how fairly they're represented in that pay. That's why it's also important for stuff like AEW to exist, regardless of what you think about the product itself, because it gives these wrestlers viable options and some negotiating power when there's other competition that can offer different contracts and a viable option, that is WWE level. I think that's huge. That's one of the biggest things to come out of all of AEW and everything, despite people wanting a new type of product or whatever it is that they want out of it. The biggest thing is the autonomy it gives the wrestlers now, and I think that's why you have a generation of wrestlers that's so emboldened and confident in their abilities, because they're no longer trying to appease to just one kind of avenue. There's a buffet that they can essentially appease to, and then if they really work hard and people recognize those talents, that will be essentially seen in the greater wrestling world, since it's a different stage now. It's a lot more connected, and like I said, there's AEW and a lot of viability in a non-WWE career now. It does kind of suck to hear though that when even in the land, when you're at the mountaintop, right, it seems like there's a transition now from WWE being a legit promotion to really just another corporate, Fortune 500 company where, in name it might seem like the dream place to work for, but just like any big company, there are the trials and tribulations that come with working for someone who ultimately is just trying to get as much profit as possible. It does suck to hear essentially long tenured staples in wrestling like Baron Corbin, which he has become, or like an R-Truth, for example, where their jobs and livelihoods kind of get thrown in the air due to the frivolous feelings, I guess, kind of CEOs and of TKO, and how they want to restructure and make more money in this wrestling business. The crazy ticket prices that are supposed to be for paying off TKO's debt, which that's BS, bro. They'll if the prices work, they'll keep them there. They're not going to just lower them, right? And with treatment of people like R-Truth, with treatment of people like Karrion Kross, with treatment of people like Dakota Kai, with treatment of people like Shayna Baszler, that we are essentially, a lot of people who do honest good work are now victims of this kind of corporate change, which is unfortunate. And the unique independent contractor status of these people too makes it extremely hard for them to unionize or really do anything to protect their freedoms or their like workers' rights. So I do think there's a lot of work still to be done in terms of that for wrestlers' autonomy. I think stuff like Pro Wrestling Tees and a lot of the internet-based delivery services that these wrestlers can use through their own means to make money is great, but I do think that the structure of contracts and how they are employed with these big companies is something that needs to be really taken a look at. I know John Oliver, like a couple years ago, did kind of a takedown of the WWE contracts and stuff like that. Like, we're already at a point where they're milking the fans dry because they know that they'll pay for crazy ticket prices to get in the building. So it kind of does become now on the talent. I do think talking about it and bringing this type of stuff to light instead of just talking about the quality of the booking kind of does help. But at the same time, if TKO is going to continue to make money, why should they keep around talent they think is cutting their bottom line, regardless of the tenure and regardless of what the wrestling industry and what wrestling deems important, right? It's unfortunate, I think Baron has or Bishop has a point, sorry, in everything he's saying, because to put in all that work, like just like anyone else in any other regular job or tenure with a company, usually the longer and more tenured you are, there are more protections usually with your job. We're at a point now, especially with wrestling, I feel like it kind of always has been, where it's very volatile and the money isn't really ever guaranteed, even when you're at the top, because you see how people can be at WWE, then get released and have to essentially work their way and build up their stock through the indies again to even, I guess, get a second chance. With AEW and with these smaller moves that allow more indies to be profitable and for TNA to kind of be doing well, and for a lot of these things to be growing, is really good for wrestlers in those contract negotiations. And hopefully there really is some sort of mobilization to improve their contracts and their state of work, moving forward.